Have you ever stood at the edge of your own grave, wondering if tomorrow would ever come? What I'm about to share with you changed everything I thought I knew about suffering, faith, and the God who never lets go, even when you're begging Him to. Stay with me, because what happened next will shake you to your core. I thought I knew it all, but this experience humbled me to the core, but at the same time it taught me a very powerful lesson about God's love. Before we begin, drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. We are family, and we need to pray for one another. Let's connect, because this story might be exactly what someone in your city needs to hear today. My name is Michael, and in 2019, when I was 34 years old, something happened that would either destroy me or remake me entirely. It started with something so random I almost laughed. Someone crashed their vehicle straight through the back wall of our church activity center. I volunteered to help with repairs because that's what you do, you show up and serve. For weeks, I lifted heavy materials and worked long hours to get the center back in working condition. Then one afternoon, while carrying wooden planks, I felt something in my lower back give way. The pain was instant and sharp, like someone had stabbed me with a hot knife. I collapsed right there. My brothers in the church had to carry me to someone's car and rush me to the hospital. The doctors ran tests and took images of my back. They gave me pain medication and told me to rest while they reviewed the results. I thought it would be a simple muscle injury, maybe a slipped disc. I was young and relatively healthy. 3 days later, the doctor called me back to his office. His face was serious in a way that made my stomach drop before he even spoke. He told me they had found something unexpected on the scan. There was a mass on my pancreas. A tumor. They needed more tests immediately to determine if it was cancerous. The doctor explained that pancreatic cancer was one of the most aggressive and deadly forms of cancer. He told me the survival rate was less than 10%. Those words echoed in my head as I walked out of that office in a daze. When I got home, my wife Sarah was cooking dinner. She turned around smiling, asking how the appointment went, and when she saw my face, the smile disappeared. We stood in that kitchen holding each other while she cried and I just felt numb. Our 2 children were at school, and I was grateful they weren't there to see us falling apart. The next few days were a blur of hospital visits and tests. Finally, they confirmed what we were dreading. It was cancer. Pancreatic cancer. They recommended immediate surgery to remove the tumor and part of my pancreas, followed by several months of chemotherapy. The night before my surgery, I lay in bed unable to sleep. I kept thinking about my children, my daughter Rebecca who was 9, and my son Daniel who was only 6. I thought about all the things I would miss if I died. Their graduations. Their weddings. Grandchildren I would never meet. I prayed that night, declaring scriptures over myself. I convinced myself that the surgery would show the doctors were wrong, that the tumor would be gone, that this was all just a test of my faith. But that's not what happened. The surgery lasted 7 hours. When I woke up, everything hurt. There were tubes coming out of my body and machines beeping around me. The surgeon told me they had removed the tumor and part of my pancreas. They saved enough of the organ that I might not need insulin injections for life. But the cancer had been real and aggressive, and I would need chemotherapy as soon as I recovered. The weeks after surgery were harder than I can describe. The incision hurt constantly. I couldn't eat without pain. I lost weight rapidly. Simple tasks like walking to the bathroom left me exhausted. Sarah had to help me bathe and dress. Our children were scared. Rebecca tried to be brave, but I could see the fear in her eyes. Daniel didn't understand why Daddy was always in bed. One night I heard him ask Sarah if I was going to die like his friend's grandfather. Hearing your 6-year-old son ask if you're dying breaks something inside you. The chemotherapy started 6 weeks after surgery. Every 2 weeks, they would pump poison into my veins for hours while I sat surrounded by other people who looked as hopeless as I felt. The side effects were worse than I'd imagined. Within days of my first treatment, I started vomiting constantly. Food tasted like metal. My hair fell out in clumps. My skin turned gray and dry. I looked in the mirror one day and didn't recognize the man staring back. But the physical suffering wasn't even the worst part. The emotional and spiritual battle nearly destroyed me. Sometimes I was angry at God. I would lie in bed at night and ask Him why this was happening to me. I had served him faithfully. And this was my reward? Cancer? Possible death at 34? It felt cruel and unfair. Other times I would plead with God desperately, begging him to heal me, to give me more time with my family. I made promises about all the things I would do if he saved me. There were moments when I tried to stand strong in faith. I forced myself to read the Bible and speak healing scriptures out loud. I attended healing services where preachers laid hands on me and prayed loudly for my restoration. But then there were the dark days. Days when I couldn't pray at all. Days when I felt nothing but emptiness and despair. Days when death seemed like a relief from the constant suffering. I remember one particular night, about 3 months into chemotherapy. The nausea was overwhelming. I had been vomiting for hours. My body was so weak I could barely lift my head. Sarah was asleep in the chair beside my bed, exhausted from caring for me. I looked at her sleeping there, her face lined with worry even in sleep, and I felt overwhelming guilt. I was destroying her life. I was traumatizing our children. I was draining our savings with medical bills. In that moment, I actually prayed for God to take me. I begged him to let me die. I told him I couldn't do this anymore, that I didn't have the strength to keep fighting, that I was ready to give up. But God didn't take me. Instead, something unexpected happened. Sarah sat on the edge of my bed, took my hand, and told me something that changed my perspective. She told me she had been praying and felt God speaking to her. She said God had shown her that I was going to get through this trial. She described how she saw our future, me recovered and healthy, our children growing up with their father, us serving God together for many more years. She spoke with such certainty and peace that something inside me shifted. I looked at her sleeping there, her face lined with worry even in sleep, and I felt overwhelming guilt. I was destroying her life. I was traumatizing our children. I was draining our savings with medical bills. In that moment, I actually prayed for God to take me. I begged him to let me die. I told him I couldn't do this anymore, that I didn't have the strength to keep fighting, that I was ready to give up. But God didn't take me. Instead, something unexpected happened. Sarah sat on the edge of my bed, took my hand, and told me something that changed my perspective. She told me she had been praying and felt God speaking to her. She said God had shown her that I was going to get through this trial. She described how she saw our future, me recovered and healthy, our children growing up with their father, us serving God together for many more years. She spoke with such certainty and peace that something inside me shifted. Around that same time, people from our church organized a schedule so someone would come sit with me every single day. They didn't preach at me or tell me to have more faith. They just came and sat with me. They brought food for Sarah and the kids. They prayed quietly. They held my hand when I cried. Brother Thomas, an older man from our congregation, came 3 times a week. He would sit beside my bed and tell me stories from his own life. He had survived a heart attack and triple bypass surgery. His presence reminded me I wasn't alone in this battle. Slowly, something began to change inside me. I started to realize that God's love for me hadn't changed just because my circumstances had changed. His promises were still true even though I was suffering. And most importantly, he was still there even when I was too weak to feel his presence. The chemotherapy continued for 6 long months. Each treatment left me sicker than the last. But something had shifted in my spirit. I stopped trying to bargain with God or demanding explanations. I simply surrendered and said I would trust him no matter what happened. During my 4th month of treatment, my doctor told me that my body was responding well to the chemotherapy. The cancer markers in my blood were dropping. For the first time, he used the word remission as a possibility. When I finished my final chemotherapy session, the hospital staff rang a bell and everyone in the treatment center applauded. I rang that bell with tears streaming down my face, grateful to be alive. When the doctor called us in for the scan results, I could tell by his face before he even spoke. He was smiling. The scans were clear. No evidence of cancer. The surgery had been successful. The chemotherapy had done its job. I was in complete remission. Sarah and I held each other and sobbed right there in the doctor's office. It felt like I had been given my life back, like I had walked through the valley of the shadow of death and emerged on the other side alive. That was in late 2019, and here I am now in 2024, still alive and healthy. It's been more than 4 years since my last treatment, and every scan has continued to come back clear. The doctors use the word cured now instead of remission. About 2 years after finishing treatment, I trained for and completed a 10-kilometer race at our city's annual charity run. Crossing that finish line felt like looking at everything I had been through and declaring that it didn't defeat me. But here's what I want you to understand. When you're in the middle of that kind of trial, you often can't see what God is doing. You question everything you thought you believed about His goodness and His love. But now, looking back, I can see things I couldn't see then. God was there every single day, even when I couldn't feel Him. His love never wavered, even when my faith did. His promises remained true, even when my circumstances seemed to contradict them. My suffering gave me the ability to help other people walking through similar valleys. In the years since my recovery, I've sat with dozens of people who received the same diagnosis I got. I've held their hands while they cried. I've listened to their fears. I've prayed with them before surgeries and during chemotherapy. Just last month, a man from a neighboring church reached out to me. He had just been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. We met for coffee, and he asked me the same questions I had asked years earlier. Why is this happening? Where is God in this? I told him my story. I told him about the anger, the fear, and the despair. I told him about the dark night when I begged God to let me die. But I also told him about the faithfulness of God that never wavered. About the church family that surrounded me. About my wife's prophetic word that kept me anchored. I watched tears run down his face as he realized he wasn't alone. And in that moment, I thanked God for my suffering. Because if my pain could bring comfort and hope to even one other person, it wasn't wasted. I still don't know why God allowed me to go through cancer. Sometimes bad things just happen in this broken world. What I do know is this: God didn't cause my cancer, but He absolutely used it. He used it to deepen my faith, strengthen my marriage, and create compassion in me. And He's using it now to minister to others who are suffering. God's love doesn't change based on our circumstances. When I was standing strong in faith, He was there. When I was failing miserably and cursing the day I was born, He was still there. His presence was the one constant through every changing emotion and every difficult day. If you're in the middle of your own valley right now, I want you to know something. God sees you. He knows exactly what you're going through. He hasn't abandoned you even if it feels that way. Keep holding on. And to my brothers and sisters in Christ around the world, please remember to pray for those who are suffering persecution for their faith. Right now, believers are being imprisoned, beaten, and killed simply for following Jesus. Pray for their courage and protection. And if you've never given your life to Jesus, today is your day. Just talk to God from your heart. Tell Him you believe Jesus died for your sins and rose from the dead. Ask Him to forgive you and come into your life. If you prayed that prayer, please comment below so we can celebrate with you. And please share this story with someone who needs to hear it today. God bless you, and may you know the love of Christ that surpasses all understanding.